Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Werewolf Bar. I'm Brian Easton, your host and author of the autobiography of a Werewolf Hunter series. This is what we call Whiskey with the Werewolf Hunter. Glad you could join us for our June edition of the show. Thanks for stopping off for a while this evening. We've got a good show for you tonight with new segments from Tex and Dr. T that I'm excited to share with you, and a new song from Thom Brannan as he continues his work on the autobiography of a Werewolf Hunter soundtrack. But before all that, let me introduce you to this month's Creature of the Night. I'd like you to meet Mad March Hare Poitin, which is, maybe you've never heard of it before, but it's basically considered Irish moonshine. It's native to Ireland and traditionally distilled in small pots. The name itself, Poitin, comes from the Irish Gaelic word for pot, the diminutive form of that. So let's have a taste of the Emerald Isle and its original creature. They even give you a little thimble-like shot glass there with the Mad March Hare on it. I'm just going to pour a little bit there. Sláinte. Okay, 40% alcohol is what I'd consider a middleweight. Not exactly what I was expecting from moonshine. None of the real punch or burn of what you might think of when you think of making moonshine. It's very sweet with an interesting little note that kind of sets it apart from most of the whiskeys that we've had on the show. It's not especially tasty to me, and it has kind of a bit of an oily aftertaste that I don't appreciate much. I think if they'd not cut down the proof so much on this, it might be better. But as it is, I'm thinking drinking Mad March Hare would take some getting used to. I might need to find another version of Poitin to decide whether or not I like it as a spirit, because if I'm just going by Mad March Hare, I'm going to have to take a pass, which is kind of a shame because I am Irish and the great-grandson of a bootlegger. Anyway, I am really happy to bring you a couple of great segments from Tex and Doc tonight. Not just because those guys always bring their respective aspects of my series to life, but because both of them are presenting subjects tonight that we've not really discussed on the show before. So we're going to start off with Tex Grebner and the little touch topic of Wolfsbane. Here's Tools of the Trade.
Howdy folks, I am Tex Grebner here, and this is Tools of the Trade for Whiskey with the Werewolf Hunter. This is going to be a bit of a slapdash episode. We weren't quite sure we were going to have an episode this month, but Brian challenged me to create a demo for a delivery system on aconite Wolfsbane, and the best that I could come up with was an injectable marinade syringe as my visual aid. Now, everybody knows how a syringe works. However, not everybody knows how a delivery dart works, and that's why I'm going to keep this stem of the plunger covered, because you can't just attach this like this. If you want a real good representation of improvised delivery darts for tranquilizers, look up green rhino hunting with archery equipment, because you can't just attach to the back. the way that your either poison or tranquilizer is delivered is through momentum, because this is all self-contained. This plunger is a heavy weight in an actual delivery dart, and it is thrust to the back upon launch. And when it hits, it then forces the liquid out as it continues forward. That's the way a dart actually works. Now, obviously, in the case of a werewolf, this would be a silver needle, but where the actual needle joins the dart that would then have fletchings or be attached to an arrow, this here is the weak point. And the needle breaking off is very evident in both real-life animal tranquilizations and in the Jurassic Park novel, as well as the Lost World Michael Crichton movie. But the way that a dart works is this plunger doesn't have this stem. The plunger continues forward when the dart hits to its hilt on the needle, and the plunger continues forward, forcing the toxin or tranquilizer out through the needle. But this junction is a huge weak point. I hope that this has been a decent slapdash segment for Tools of the Trade on explaining the problematic issues that you might have in trying to deliver aconite wolfsbane to the wolfen kin, because you can't just tie this to an arrow and expect it to work. The dart is very specific to its purpose and works on momentum in one way to keep the fluid in the syringe, and another way to drive the fluid out by the plunger sinking home.
Okay, so Aconitum napellus, aka monk's hood, aka wolfsbane, which we all know is usually associated with werewolves. It's said to have special properties against them, often depicted as a deterrent, sometimes a cure in folklore. It's had a long history as a ward against werewolves in that kind of a tradition, where the very presence could keep them away and even tame them in some traditions. So wolfsbane's also been depicted as a catalyst whereby one might become a werewolf, especially during the full moon. Now, I think most of us know by now that monk's hood, wolfsbane, aconite, is a highly poisonous plant in real life, part of the nightshade family. And maybe the stories about its potency arose from its use as a poison in the days of yore, particularly against predators like wolves. So in my werewolf hunting universe, wolfsbane is a narcotic to werewolves, somewhere on par with heroin in human beings. We first encounter this aconite being used as a narcotic in Book 3 of the original series in the Great Cemetery on the island of Cyprus. Sylvester finds the leavings of what he describes as a werewolf hootenanny, with several human corpses left around, and syringes and bowls of liquefied aconite to tell the tale. Later, he uses a bag of the stuff to distract Janos Skorzeny during an encounter, because you might imagine that a big bag of that stuff probably has a pretty good street value among werewolves. But he distracts Janos Skorzeny. And so I wanted to incorporate this legendary plant into my literary universe with an original usage. And in so doing, I introduced something besides silver that can harm the beast. That's my dust up, and I appreciate Tex for illustrating a delivery system in a trank dart that could potentially cause a werewolf to OD. Thanks, Tex. Excellent choice in using the injector as an example. Well, if you watch this show with any regularity, you've met author, musician, and songwriter Thom Brannan. We share some of the music with you from time to time, especially as it pertains to his composition of an original Werewolf Hunter soundtrack. What's going on there is that for many years, I had kind of compiled a unofficial soundtrack from different songs that seemed to fit different characters or moods or events in the book series. And so if you're interested in any of that, there's a link in the description down below that leads to a Spotify playlist where you can see what I'm talking about. But what Thom has been doing is reimagining his own songs based on mood, theme, etc. Whatever might strike him. He's really put himself into this project, and in a day and age where an artist's human touch is increasingly at hazard, I appreciate Thom and his abilities all the more. So let me set this song up just a bit. In the first book, Sylvester guns down a cult of really low-level werewolves during a transformation ritual in Galgier, Manitoba, and he kills them all. But they revert to their human form, and Sly gets caught, he gets prosecuted, and he's sent up the river. The newspapers refer to the event as the Galgier Massacre, which made SLJ the Silver Bullet Killer. Thank you, Tom, for all your hard work on this. And when the soundtrack is finished, I think we're just going to showcase the whole thing right here, front to back. And all original pieces written and composed by Tom, man of many parts. Thanks, Tom. So let me jump back to Wolfsbane just for a minute, because I've mentioned wanting to include it in my book series because it's classic werewolf item, right? It's a staple of werewolf mythology. And if you've read the Winter Fox journals, you know that I also incorporate things like the wolf strap belt and the ointment that are used heavily in some French folklore in transforming a man into a werewolf. But I also like to use the actual historic werewolves in my writing, translating real life figures into fictional counterparts, such as I did with Peter Stubb, Old Thies, the Livonian, and the Gandillon family, just to name a few. So with this in mind, let me introduce you to a new limited series by Dr. T. Brassard. Beginning tonight, we're calling it Werewolves Who Were. And we're starting off in rural central France during the 1760s with the infamous Beast of Gevaudan. Here's Doc Talk Shop.
Hello and welcome to Doc Talk Shop with Whiskey with the Werewolf Hunter. Tonight, I'm talking about one of the greatest werewolf stories of all time, the Beast of Gevaudan. It is considered by most to be the blueprint for the typical ethos of the werewolf created by modern media. It has the silver bullet, the struggle between the church and the beast, and a lot of other elements that media has made much of. 18th century, around 1764, if memory serves, a series of killings began in the region known as Gevaudan. They were initially assumed to be wolf attacks, which at the time were not uncommon, but the more they went on, the more details started to come out, and it became obvious that it wasn't a typical wolf attack. One thing, the kills were almost inevitably young women, and they were attacked mainly in the throat and the head area. Now, a normal wolf attack would see someone attacked by the legs, and ears would be eaten because that's where all the stuff a wolf would normally be and apply to the humanoid frame. You want to give it a breadbasket is history. The nature of the kills, the particular focus on young women, and the fact that when the beast was seen and shot at, in fact, the boys using the bother much, and they didn't seem to be afraid of men, all led people to believe that the beast was supernatural. And the church played on this, hoping to get more asses and pews. There's evidence to suggest that the beast was in fact a kind of big cat, and that's not as unreasonable as it sounds, because when big cats hunt, they tend to go for the head or the neck, and that's how they kill. This is very similar to how people were killed by the beast. And at the time, a lot of big cats, lions, tigers, and so on, were kept in private zoos or menageries by the nobility. So basically what we have is the possibility of somebody's pet getting out and going rogue, and that could have been the basis for why the beast was sometimes described as a wolf and sometimes described as other things. Another likely candidate, although a little more far-fetched, the wolf. And then, of course, there could have just been one or more unusually motivated wolves, or even, if you believe in the supernatural, a werewolf. Now, Jean Castile gets credit for killing the beast, is said to have gotten some silver made into a bullet, and that's what killed the beast. You also have the bullet blessed, so you have the combination of beast being affected by the holy and by the silver. And the silver, of course, has a connection to the moon. There's also the theory that silver disrupts the action of the pineal gland, which some occultists believed back then is how werewolves and so on were able to change their shape through the function of the pineal gland, or the third eye, as some people call it. Also evidence there was an Catholic or possibly an occult group in Gevaudan at the time, and that the killings could have been the result of a conflict between the church and this group. If indeed existed, this theory was dramatized in the movie Brotherhood of Wolf, although not clearly, in my opinion. Gevaudan is not a legend in the sense of most legends. It is historically documented. These things did happen. There are documents at Versailles. One of the creatures that was thought to be the beast was taxidermied and presented at Versailles, and essentially was done away with, quickly buried, because the king didn't like the resulting taxidermy. So, the point is, you have a real killing series, have a real situation, and people being people came up to them with what to them was a reasonable explanation. And over time, these things become exaggerated on in mind, become elaborated on by writers and commentators. Some people saw the beast as the work of the devil. Some people saw the beast as the wrath of God. So which was it? It had been both. These are all worthy questions. One factor that stands out to me as a historical researcher is the fact that the killings went on for almost a year before the king and the nobility took notice. Only interested in as long as he took up the attention. He lost interest in it very quickly because it wasn't a one done kind of deal. The way he imagined it would be. He imagined that with his mere words, the king of France, the beast would have laid down the hunt to kill it. In fact, there's even doubt that Jean Castile killed the actual beast. You you ask or what you read. With that in mind, I'll say good hunting and mind alone.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Doc, for bringing that to us. You know, I think the Beast of Gevaudan is one of my favorite werewolf, or at least werewolf adjacent stories, because as Doc pointed out, there's no dispute as to whether the thing actually happened. I mean, 100 or more people were killed, twice that many attacked, And like Doc said, this is more than just a legend. I mean, the king got involved. But it is a mystery nonetheless. A mystery on the par, I think, with the likes of Jack the Ripper. And like the Ripper, researchers, authors, and history sleuths will argue in all kinds of different directions as to the identity of Jack, but we still don't know for sure. Right now, I just want to kick up my favorite image of the Beast, which is a triptych from the renowned artist Walton Ford. And as you can see, Mr. Ford depicts the Beast much as did the artist who came before him, as a wolf-like creature of great size, but not exactly a wolf, a description which could also apply to the werewolves of my books, woven. Doc pointed out some of the theories as to what the Beast, and some say beasts, may have been, like a jungle cat escaped from a menagerie. But right now, let me share with you my favorite theory, and it's not that the Beast was a werewolf. Watch now. So that last picture was of a hyaenodon, an extinct predator that lived in the Eocene to the early Miocene, we're told. I like to think that at least one member of that ancient species survived until the 18th century and made the Gevaudan region in France its hunting grounds for a while. Anyway, we hope you enjoyed our initial outing into werewolves that were, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the other famous werewolves coming your way from Dr. T. Well, it's the last call at Ye Old Werewolf Bar, and against my better judgment, I'm going to have another snort of this poitin. Cilantro. Yep, not overly impressed. Hey, thanks for being here tonight. And remember, you can find all our links on books and other werewolf-related shenanigans in the description down below. Again, special thanks to Tex, Doc, and Thom Brannan for their contributions, and we hope that you will come back and see us again next time. In the meantime, you can find us on the web at werewolfhunter.com. We'll see you in July, and until then, happy hunting and mind the moon.